Hey, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. How are you doing? You doing all right? If not, that's okay. Take a seat. We'll talk about some books. I'm here to give you my little wrap up for April. As you can see, we might have changed up some things, but for right now, this is kind of all the sneak peek you're gonna get. I promise I will reveal more soon, but we are in quite the new location. Anyway, I'm gonna run you down all the books I read in April, so honestly, let's just get started. I would be quite remiss in, I think, not mentioning that something I read in April was the first 640 pages of War and Peace. Today is the second last day of the month, and that's how far of the way through I am through this beast. It is absolutely incredible. I cannot recommend this book enough. I will have my full thoughts on this in May's wrap up as well, and of course we will be doing a live show. This is for the Dickens versus Tolstoy book club. I've also been doing this new series called the Tolstoy Diaries, in which I've been reading this book and vlogging the whole thing. It is incredible. I went into this completely blind, and I've been having seriously the best time of my life. I can't even tell you what this book means to me now. And I'm about almost halfway through. So yeah, I just thought I should include that here because I really have made a lot of progress, and 640 pages could well be 2 or 3 books. So I just thought I should mention Tolstoy here as well. But the first book that I ended up completing in April was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I really wasn't the biggest fan of this. I kind of felt like this book didn't do very much for me, didn't accomplish very much for me, and I gave it a pretty generous 3 stars because there wasn't anything per se wrong with it. I felt like the writing was very average, the plot was very average. I first heard of this one in high school actually because I know this one is super popular. For some reason I thought a lot of people really enjoyed this book, but since mentioning it in vlogs and stuff, I've learned that a lot of people, and most people I think, really seem not to enjoy The Alchemist, and I do know why. But I first heard of this in high school because my friend who was sitting at the desk next to me was reading The Alchemist. It was in civics class, and I had finished all my work, and then I stole her book and started reading it, and then I just didn't pick it up until years later now. If you've never heard of this one, we are following a shepherd boy, and his dream is to travel the world, hence why he became a shepherd. But when there is this prophecy that he finds out about himself that he has his own treasure meant only for him, hidden in Egypt at the pyramids in Egypt, he goes on this journey to get to Egypt, and along the way he encounters this man, the alchemist. This is very much it is kind of a fable, very much fairy tale book. I was just so let down. The ending was incredibly anticlimactic, and it just, like I said, did not do anything for me. I was never invested in the plot, never invested in the characters. I felt like I wasn't sure why things were happening. I didn't too much care about the morals or the very kind of basic overarching premises and ideas that this book wanted to talk about. It just did not work for me at all. So I don't know if I'll ever be picking up more of this author's work, but regardless, I am actually in the middle of The Alienist by Assis, so I am definitely reading some more works from Brazil. Just didn't really love this one. The next book I listened to in April was The Library of Legends by Janie Chang. I saw this one on Libby, decided to pick it up and give it a go. This one is historical fiction, also with a lot of fantasy and mythology in there, set in 1937 during the Second Sino-Japanese War, and we are following a group of students who are in China. So they're all studying at the same university, and we're principally following about maybe 3 or 4 of them. But when war breaks out in the city where their university is, they have to go on this journey across China on foot, and with them they are all carrying with them a part of what is known as the Library of Legends. Copies, and I think, are they originals or almost original copies of myth, Chinese myth and legend and folklore and stories. And so each student is entrusted with 1 or 2 scrolls of the Library of Legends, and they are now the protectors of the scroll that they carry. And so you follow this group, this band of students and professors and stuff like that, as they are trying to get across war-torn China while huge risks of Japanese interceding, invading, and destroying the land and themselves is a huge risk. And of course you follow them through all the things that they're going through. They encounter soldiers and different villages in China. You really get to see like the countryside of China in this book too, which was incredible. What I really liked about this was, like I said, the fantasy element, because the Library of Legends itself actually plays quite a bigger role than just being on a scroll. So, yeah, but that's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't think the synopsis says too much other than that. I thought this was really interesting. I did give it 3 stars again because it wasn't everything that I wanted. It did get quite tedious at times. There's definitely a lot of talk about politics and stuff like that as well, which is really interesting, but overall, I feel like this historical fiction just missed a few marks for me. There was some nice romance, really nice descriptions, but overall, I just felt like it didn't like wow me. Next up, I was really in the mood, and a lot of these I tried. I was just really in the mood for comfort, fairy tale, fantasy, magic, romance, feel-good things. So I picked up The Wish Granter by C.J. Redwine, which is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. I had previously read one of my favorite young adult books by C.J. Redwine last year, which is The Blood Spell, which is a retelling of Cinderella, but I decided to give this one a go. They're all part of the same series called Ravenspire, but you can read them out of order. So The Wish Granter, again, was a little bit of a letdown. Let's talk about good things in this book. The food writing. Something that always just makes me so happy is C.J. Redwine's homage to food, and especially fantasy food and like fairy tale food. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just sounds so delicious. It sounds like food that you really have to try hard to imagine like what it looks like and tastes like, but she is so expert at just making your mouth water while you're reading. Fabulous. This book also had really lovable characters. We are following a brother and sister, Thad and Ari, and they are the illegitimate son and daughter of the king. And when Thad makes a wish with the wish granter, who is Rumpelstiltskin, they are now the king and princess of Sundrail, the kingdom. So they are just really lovely, honestly. I love their relationship. They're just really lovable characters. I did really like them. We also follow Sebastian, who is the weapons master, and there is romance there. Another really great thing was just the comfort. Like I said, C.J. Redwine's books just like ooze comfort for me, and they're very kind of young adult books, the way that they're written and stuff like that, which was just nice. Unfortunately, some cons. This book was extremely repetitive. We're pretty much only following one issue, which is that of the wish granter, or the man named Alistair Teague, because he is our main antagonist. He is the villain. He is doing some bad stuff in the kingdom, and that's really all we're following. And for quite a long book, it does get so tedious and monotonous to follow the same problems. This also had a very repetitive narrative style when talking about these problems, so it was almost like a repeat of sentences sometimes, and a refresh of information that is so simple, especially when you only have one plot to follow. I think this book really could have benefited a lot from not only cutting down editing scenes in general, adding some subplots, adding in more characters, honestly, because like I said, we don't follow that many. I am interested in reading more of the Ravenspire series as well, but I would highly recommend The Blood Spell, not The Wish Granter. Next up, I read Almond by Won Pyung-sun. This is pretty good. I am still thinking about this one. I think I gave it like maybe 3 stars or 3.5. Really was not generous this month, but that's fine. So this one is set in Korea, and we are following this boy, and he has alexithymia, which means that he can't distinguish feelings that he feels. He doesn't know what anger or sadness or heartbreak or anything like that feels like. He's unable to put a label on them, and so he relies on his mom and his grandma to explain the world for him. And he constantly asks them questions like, what can I respond in this social setting? How do I deal with this? How do I make people not make fun of me and not treat me poorly because I can't process emotions and feelings in the way that those around me do? I thought this was really heartbreaking at times, really hard to read. More than that, there's so many tragedies in this book, so I guess go in knowing that as well, because most of this book revolves around one of these tragedies and another boy that this tragedy brings into our protagonist's life. And then we follow these 2 boys as they grow up. They go to school together. We see their lives converge, intersect. That was probably my favorite part of this book, was just seeing these 2 boys and their relationship and what they were going through and how they provided and what they provided for each other. The writing in Almond is very conversational, very just easy to fall into. There's nothing flowery here. There's no huge descriptions because we're all set from the point of view of our protagonist, who, like I said, is unable to feel emotion. So it's all very blunt and kind of, you know, flat-edged prose, which was really interesting in this case. Like, I really liked being in his head. Yeah, it's also a very super short one if you would like to give it a go. So that is Almond. Next up, I got to read a nonfiction. This is probably one of my favorite books of the month, honestly. I didn't have too many favorite books this month. So this one was So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Oluo. This is a nonfiction all about how to go about speaking to others about race. It talks about so many things, provides definitions for a variety of topics, such as privilege, such as racism, such as the prison to school pipeline. It talks about policing in America and the history of the police force in America all the way back to the Civil War. It talks about a whole host of strategies you can use when trying to talk to people about these really important issues. It gives examples of how you can talk to like your loved ones about these issues, or your friends and family and anyone really, even someone at the grocery store. It talks about like what you can actually do in your own life to confront these issues and to confront racism, and how exactly you should go about that, literally in step-by-step ways, which is amazing. I would highly recommend this book. I learned a ton. I learned so much, and on top of that, Ijoma Oluo's writing style is gorgeous, clear, concise, a wonder to read. She also includes a lot of her own story, her own personal experiences, and just to have like those two things beside each other, I just thought it was a really well done book. And like I said, it explored tons and talked about tons, so would highly recommend. Next up, I read Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jędraski. This one actually came into my PO box around Christmas time. I had never previously heard of it, so thank you so much. I believe this was a gift from Camille, so thank you. I finally got around to reading it. I would highly recommend the audiobook because the audiobook narrator's voice is wonderful, intensely relaxing as well, but this one is set in Poland in the 1980s, and again, we are following two boys and their relationship, and they're kind of growing up together. It's set during a span of maybe like, is it a couple years or something like that? But we have Ludwik and Janusz, and they meet each other at this work camp in Poland in the summer of 1980. And one thing that I really loved about this book, there were a bunch. First of all, the writing is gorgeous. It's just so gorgeous. It's so nice. Highly recommend. Very lush, just really nice descriptions, and also heartbreaking. A lot of this book holds conversations and revolves around Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which is one of my favorite classics and one of my favorite reads from last year. And so Ludwik gets a copy that you're not supposed to have of Giovanni's Room, and one day when Janusz kind of notices it, he lends it out to Janusz, and then they start to have conversations about Giovanni's Room. And so the book kind of provides a starting point like for these conversations and also for this book, because as you can imagine, these two boys trying to form a relationship in 1980 in Poland when the party is in power is just so hard and so heartbreaking. And so you see them drift apart. They are kind of exiled from paradise after they leave that summer camp, and then they go back into the city. They find that things are so different. Everything is going really poorly for Poland, the way that they are being treated by a whole host of different people and countries, and especially what the wars have done to the country as well. And now these two people are trying to find how to live and how to love each other in this climate, in this political climate. It was just really heartbreaking. I gave this 3.5 stars. I felt like a little bit of it kind of dragged and not a lot. I felt like there was a lot of tension at the beginning, and then there didn't seem to be that much payoff. What I will say is that this felt just incredibly real and raw. Like, I thought that was just incredible. I really did feel like I was reading a true story, not fiction at all, which was really nice. And like I said, it's just so lyrical, so haunting, so hard-hitting, and I really did like the pairing of Ludwik and Janusz's relationship against the political backdrop of what's happening in Poland. There's tons of problems that the country is facing, and then these two boys have to face themselves in the problems that the country is facing. I don't think I was in like the best headspace ever to read this in April, but I did nonetheless. I am happy I read it. It was really gorgeous, and I would highly recommend. That's the thing with a lot of the books actually I read and listened to in April, even if I didn't highly enjoy them myself. Like, I know 100% that a lot of you guys would probably really enjoy them, and I think Swimming in the Dark is one of those books, so highly suggest you pick this one up. Gorgeous. Ba-doo. Similarly, another book that I think a lot of you guys would really enjoy that unfortunately just did not hit any marks for me was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I did give this a very sad 3 stars. This is about a man. His name is Linus Baker. What a nice name. He works at, oh, actually, you know what I imagine? He works, do you know that scene in The Incredibles where Mr. Incredible is like hunched over in his cubicle and he's like working? It's like that. That is exactly where Linus Baker works. He works at writing these reports of magical orphanages. You were just thrown headfirst into this world. Nothing's really explained, which was nice. I just don't think it was like super well done. But anyway, in this world, there are magical children. There's also this huge prejudice, fear, and hatred towards these children who have these abilities. And so Linus Baker compiles reports on the orphanages that he visits and then decides whether or not they need to be shut down. So his next assignment, which this book is all about, is when he goes to the house in the Cerulean Sea, which is on this island, and there he meets all the children there, and he starts to come out of his shell to form relationships with them, to see what their life is like, to really get immersed into their world. And it was just supposed to be really sweet, wholesome. There's romance, there's fantasy, you're supposed to fall in love with these children. What I will say is that this book really did remind me of the movie Up. So if you like that, I would suggest this one. But on the whole, I think why it didn't work for me, like just personally, I think it felt a little bit too stilted and too staged. Like, TJ Klune, I feel like, writes these children's dialogue with like the 100% saturated goal in mind to make them as like morbidly cute and funny as possible, because one of the children is the Antichrist. So there's just like a lot, but in my opinion, it was just like too much. It felt way too fake. It didn't feel natural to me at all. And Linus's relationship with these children, like, I felt like it was a story where I knew exactly what would happen, but just the interactions and stuff like that, it was cheesy, and I wouldn't mind the cheese, except that the cheese felt like it was fake cheese, so you couldn't actually eat the cheese. It was just plastic. Does that make sense? And we're not here to eat fake cheese. Unfortunately, that was that. It just felt too staged for me. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel like it flowed smoothly. It just felt very stilted and contrived. So I do think a lot of people would absolutely adore this though, and it was very whimsical and magical. So if you are looking for something like that to make you feel just happy and like a fruit gusher inside, this is the one for you. Another of the books that I would probably call my favorite was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I think it's Michaelides, actually, right? This is a psychological thriller about a woman named Alicia, and she shoots her husband in the face 6 times, I think. That'll do it. She stops speaking completely. So we follow both her perspective and the perspective of her psychotherapist, who is this man named Theo. And we find out that Theo has just recently transferred to the Grove, which is the psych hospital where Alicia has been for the past, I think, 7 years. But he has specifically asked to be transferred because he is obsessed with her. He wants to get her to speak again. That's his only goal. And so you follow like their relationship. And I don't know, I'm really not usually like a thriller person because I find them a little bit boring, but psychological ones really tend to interest me. I really wasn't sure where this book was going for a long time. All I can say is that like along the way, I was really enjoying the discussions and what would go on when you are faced with someone who doesn't speak. Specifically with someone who can speak but chooses not to, and what that looks like. And there's obviously so much like projection that goes on from Theo to Alicia, and there's so much transference that goes on between the two as Theo is trying to like find out why she's not speaking, maybe what she's not going to do, but also in the midst of all that, before the accident. You don't shoot someone 6 times in the face and it's an accident. Before she murdered her husband, she was a super famous, gifted painter, and her husband was a photographer, a model photographer, I believe. And so She kills her husband, stops speaking, and then her last form of communication is this painting, which she calls the Alcestis. And the Alcestis is a very not super well-known play of Euripides, in which this husband is asked to die or else his wife will die, and the husband decides to live. And so his wife is sent to hell, is sent to Hades, but she comes back. And when she comes back from death, from the place of not the living, she stops speaking. And then Alicia like creates this painting portraying herself as Alcestis, and Theo is trying to figure out like why. I thought this was incredible. I love how there's so much Greek myth inserted in here, and the ending of this book really, really got me. The floor, boom, there was like a trapdoor. There's a trapdoor in this book, and I fell right through it. And I loved it. It was like really good. It was definitely not like creepy. It's just very like kind of disturbing, and like you want to know like why, what happens. This one took me a little bit to listen to because there is a lot of trauma in here, and we are reading some of Alicia's diaries and stuff like that, and Theo as a person is also not okay at all. He's going through a lot, clearly. I mean, who would transfer for this one specific patient? That already indicates that something is not going on well for him. So really enjoyed, gave it 4 stars. I would recommend. Then we have Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, which was the Dark Academics Book Club pick. I also gave this one 3 stars, but this is about Bree, who is 16 years old, and her mother has just died in a car accident, and she has also just started studying at the University of North Carolina. But when she gets there, she starts to see some things. She starts to see some demons, and eventually she infiltrates this group called the Legendborn, who turn out to be the descendants of King Arthur and his knights. Once again, this book had some incredible, spectacular things and some not so great things, so let's start with the good things. What I really loved about this was Tracy Deonn's take, spin, inclusion, and wrapping of words around Arthurian legend through the eyes of 16-year-old Bree. The book had incredibly immersive and important discussions. This is fantasy, there's magic and stuff like that, but it also deals with so much grief, because as you can imagine, Bree has just lost her mother, and she's also struggling to find her place, and when she finds herself surrounded by the Legendborn, that also brings up so many questions. The cool kind of like King Arthur thing, that I didn't really too much care about. It kind of fell by the wayside, which I'll talk about in a second, but just I thought the depictions of grief and what Bree is going through and her trauma and stuff like that, coupled with discussions about like the fantasy parts and stuff like that, was really, really well done. Like I said, the King Arthur thing and just the whole writing of it, this book had so much exposition and so much info dump. It did not feel natural to me at all. Bree would like ask someone in Legendborn, what is this or what is that, and then we would get like 5 pages of just dry explanation. There was a lot of telling for me and not a lot of showing, unfortunately. I really did not care about any of the side characters. I didn't care about the whole King Arthur thing. There are so many rules, so many titles, so many little details, and honestly, even like 300 to 400 pages through, you are still getting a lot of info dump and a lot of exposition and just like random rules being thrown in there, seemingly for added tension or added risk, or just to make the consequences or outcomes heightened. However, to balance it out with another good thing, I did really like the writing of the relationships between Bree, our protagonist, and then we also have Nick and Sel, who are part of Legendborn, and those are kind of our 2 other mainish characters. But I did really, really like the writing of their relationship. I thought it was just super well done, so that was really good. There were some twists at the end that I also didn't see coming and that I really, really enjoyed as well. But overall, just with the writing and the info dump and stuff like that, it just didn't land like a 4-star for me. So I'd say like maybe a 3. Yeah, 3 sounds pretty good. So that is Legendborn. Alright, next up, I read a fantasy romance, and that was Rapsodic by Laura Thalassa. This is a fae romance in which we're following Callie, who is actually a siren, and this also switches back and forth between 2 timelines, one 7 years ago and one in the present. And Callie, aside from being a siren, also has a bracelet. But it's not an ordinary bracelet. It has 322 beads, and each bead corresponds to a bargain that she has struck in the past with this man named the Bargainer, but she's never paid any of them back. And so in the present timeline, he reappears back in her life without any warning, and you see why. So you follow their relationship, and you also see like the past and stuff like that and what happened for them. This was just honestly fun, easy, super quick. It was what I wanted, what I needed at the time. I gave it 3 stars. I would continue the series. There's definitely some cool kind of creepy things. There's a lot of like very dark kind of nightmarish elements to this as well, and I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So that was Rapsodic. Next, we have a very short, I don't know if it's technically, maybe it's a novella, but it is The Armies of Those I Love by Ken Liu, which is a quote from Walt Whitman. This one was really difficult to read. So this is a sci-fi, and we are set way in the future, post-apocalyptic. Humanity has decimated ourselves, and the few of us who survive now live on moving cities who are controlled by these people called the pilots, who are basically regarded as these divine entities because they are the ones who decide where we travel in what is left of planet Earth. In this one, we're following a 14-year-old orphan named Franny, and she does not live on one of these moving cities. She lives in a hole in the ground, trying to hide from them, because on these cities, as you can imagine, there are super strict rules. There's not a lot you're allowed to do, but when Franny runs into a fugitive who is fleeing from one of these cities, she takes him along with her, and they go on basically this adventure together to try and find one of the pilots of these cities to find out more about the past and memories and what life used to be like, and maybe what happened to Franny's family. What I will say, the writing, it reminded me a little bit of William Gibson, definitely nowhere near as like talented as William Gibson, I would say, but in the specific way that Ken Liu will just name drop something, like a capital, you know, he'll name drop a capital noun, and then you as the reader are left to figure out like, what the heck could this possibly be? What is this? What does it mean? What am I really witnessing here? Which was interesting, but a lot of it like just became a little bit of a conceptual nightmare to me because I really could not picture a lot of what was going on, but I did really enjoy the ending of this one. Definitely made you go back, reevaluate. And on top of that conceptual nightmare, like, yes, it was a bit difficult, but it does provide the reader like a very interactive chair in this book, because you start to decide yourself what these things are, what things look like, what the world can and cannot do. Like, it's a very relationship formed narrative style with the author and with the world, because you as the reader are now left to do a lot of the work. But yes, I did give this one another 3 stars. It was the month of 3 stars, what can I say? The last book I read in April, I actually just finished it this afternoon. That is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I don't know what I was expecting from this, but I really actually liked it. I gave it like a 3.5, almost a 4-star. I just feel like the book kind of went a little bit like that. Do you know what I mean? This one is definitely classic fantasy, published I think in 1968 maybe, but we're following this boy named Ged, and I hate Ged. I hate him so much. He's so arrogant and prideful, and basically he is a wizard. He's training to be a wizard. He goes to this wizard school, and because he is so prideful and wants to show off, he tries to best one of his friends, and he ends up summoning a spirit of the dead who now haunts him, follows him around, could potentially destroy the world and stuff like that. And so the rest of the book, after he summons the spirit, is just him trying to hunt it down, vanquish it, conquer it, and get back to life. This was really cozy, honestly. I just really liked it. That's what I love about fantasy books. They're always so cozy to me. Like I said, the beginning was really comforting because there's a lot of travel, you meet a lot of new people, there's lots of like just staying places, and the wizarding school was fun. But I think after Ged went on his adventure to find his shadow that he summoned, it just did go downhill for me. But yes, overall I definitely am glad that I read it. I don't know if I'll continue on with Earthsea just because I don't know where the heck it's gonna go, but if you've read this, I think it's a quartet, right? If you've read any of it, let me know, because then I will make an informed decision. So those are all the books I got to in April. My May TBR will be coming out I think in a couple of days. Let me know if you read any of these. I'm so excited to continue on with War and Peace. But yeah, also, what did you read this month? How did you do? What did you like? What didn't you like? What books did you love? Please leave some recommendations for us all in the comments. Tell us how your month went. What did you do? How are you? Yeah, let's talk, let's chat. So, but until then, I will see you very soon in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Ciao.